I'd like to address the question, but, you know, failing to tell the truth, failing to know the truth, is failing to lead. And when you go into that poll on Tuesday, the booth, just remember the issue of truthfulness, because that's important in this election. Now, I was just attacked by the governor because he said I'm under investigation in Rhode Island. There's been a TV ad saying I'm under investigation, not to mention the fact that Governor Carcieri hired my company, and I helped him save over $300 million. And I did a lot of work for him. Governor Carcieri wrote a letter just recently, and I'm going to read it real quickly. It's come to my attention that a series of attack ads have been circulating in New Hampshire in an attempt to smear John Stephen by indicating he's under investigation for some work in Rhode Island. Let me set the record straight. John Stephen is not and never was under investigation for the work he did. His efforts helped save Rhode Island taxpayers millions of dollars and have given our state more flexibility to manage Medicaid than any other state in the nation. John's work was an unqualified success, and our state has tremendously been grateful for his expertise and the results he has delivered. He has always conducted himself with the utmost integrity and professionalism. That's what my mom and dad taught me in the beginning of my life, to always tell the truth. Unfortunately, Governor Lynch, it's time you start telling the people of this state the truth. You did raise business taxes, and you just said you didn't. One more untruth, and it's got to stop.
FRM in Laconia, New Hampshire, the Financial Resources Mortgage, is still raising its ugly head. Government agencies are pointing fingers at each other. Where is the blame, and what would you do about it?
Thank you very much. By the way, the deal is under investigation by the Attorney General's office. So that is going on right now in Rhode Island, according to the Attorney General. With regard to FRM, and you're all familiar with that, you know, I have enormous empathy for the people who lent money to FRM who then lost money. And I believe those who perpetrated this should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Now, we've had a number of agencies look at it. Our Securities Division looked at that. The Attorney General wrote a lengthy report, and there was blame all around. Blame in terms of the banking department, Securities Department, the Attorney General's office, and I share some of that as well, as the buck does stop with me. But the fact is that we also have the SEC looking at it, the FBI is involved. So there are numerous organizations looking at this. The Attorney General has proposed, and we've already adopted, numerous recommendations, having, in fact, members of the various state commissions and state agencies and departments working together in a collaborative way, sharing information to make sure that nothing like this happens again. I vetoed a bill that came to me that would have permitted the banking department to have exclusive jurisdiction and authority over this. We have training underway, and if there are more recommendations coming forward, we'll certainly look to adopting them and to ensure again that something like this never happens again here in New Hampshire. Thank you.
This is a tragic case. It's so unfortunate that it happened to these families. I've met a number of them. I've talked about their life, how they've lost their life savings. You know, 3 different departments were at fault here, and everyone blaming each other. As governor, the very first thing I would have done is ask for an independent investigation. The families of victims here have asked the governor for an independent investigation. It wasn't until a few weeks ago the Secretary of State decided, because the governor didn't ask for an independent investigation, to find out exactly what went wrong so it never happens again, that the Secretary of State on his own, Bill Gardner, thank God for Bill Gardner, decided to do an investigation with an independent analysis. And that's what I would have done. I met with a few of the families the other day in Portsmouth, and they still to this day are calling on an independent investigation. There's one other thing I want to mention. I was a prosecutor, and I do care deeply about public safety. My 2 young girls, Hannah and Nicole, aged 13 and 15, I want them to be in a safe environment, you know. And we just talked about Senate Bill 500. I don't want to let sex offenders out of jail early. I prosecuted sex offenders. I wanted to make sure they were there for as long as their sentence was possible. And you know, now they're going to get out early. And we just saw in the paper today, one of them's getting out. He has no job. He doesn't know where to go. He doesn't want to leave prison early. And there was another last week that lives in New York, and he's leaving early. Had he reached his maximum, he would have been sent back to New York. And now we have to watch him here for 9 months in New Hampshire. It's not right. It's not about politics. It's about making sure we fix this flawed law. And that's the issue of Senate Bill 500. We deal with FRM. These things are going on right now in New Hampshire. This election is about making sure we get back to our public safety, communities safe, and making sure we also bring value. And what I would have done as governor as well with the FRM scandal, you know, we have those individuals that defrauded that family are going to get 15 some odd years in the federal prison. They're in the federal system, Governor. You know, you have a state statute here that says theft by deception. I would have had my Attorney General prosecute them and get concurrent, consecutive sentences and make sure they never get out on the streets again. Woo!
This is our final question before the candidates give their closing remarks and have to leave to meet other commitments. To both candidates, we know that we are in tough financial times right now. How will you cut the state budget 5%, 10% without raising local property taxes?
Thank you for the question. As we think about the next budget, and again, this is what I did in the private sector, my approach is to zero-base the budgets. Now, it is an analysis that people sometimes refer to, but it's hard to do because it's very arduous work, and it requires going in and sitting down with members of the department and assuming that there's no money in the budget, and building those budgets from ground zero on up to assure that we're spending taxpayer dollars as effectively and efficiently as we possibly can. John Stephen has said, and he's backed away from this, I think, recently, that he's going to come in and cut everything by 10% across the board. 45% of what the state spends is primarily aid to education. If you cut that by 10% across the board, you will necessarily drive up local property taxes. He has said, as I mentioned earlier, he's going to cut $300 million out of Medicaid, which will deny coverage necessarily to seniors and pregnant women and children. And the way he's going to slash aid to higher education will necessarily increase tuition by in excess of 20%. I don't think that's the right way to do it. You approach the budget, you should build it from the ground zero on up. That's the only way you can ensure that we're spending taxpayer money effectively and efficiently, and that's the only way that you can ensure that the dollars are invested for the right purposes. At the same time, we're protecting our most vulnerable citizens here in New Hampshire, which is an obligation, I think, is part of what makes our state so special. Thank you.
You know, I wish we had a lot of time to talk about my plan and what I want to do to get our state moving back on track again. The governor said that I'm going to drive up property taxes. What he doesn't tell you is it's being sued, the state is, for $114 million of downshifting this past budget year, cutting off rooms and meals to local towns, cutting off building aid, cutting off sewer aid, cutting the retirement distribution. That's how he solved his budget crisis. And he also solved it by taking funds offline and putting in $90 million in liquor, putting it into another fund. $90 million of building aid was always spent out of the operating budget, Governor. You put it into the capital budget, so it's all borrowed. Continuing to borrow, and that's what they call a cut. No state in this country, 40 states, according to the National Governors Association, cut spending. 40 states. New Hampshire wasn't one of them. You know, I want to balance this budget. We're facing a nearly $800 million deficit now because of all the borrowing, bonding, acceptance of stimulus without a backup plan. And I have a pen here. It's very simple. This is what this election's all about. Because we're going into according to the State Employees Association, the worst budget crisis of our history. And I have a pen here, and I pledge that I will veto any taxes. And we're going to balance the budget without new taxes. We're going to do it by being more efficient. We have human resource in every single state department. We have finance officers in every department. I had over 250. Department of Transportation probably has 300. Yet we have a department administration. We have contracts in every single department. Hundreds of contracts. Nobody talks. There's no leader that brings everyone together and says, we're going to be more efficient here. And that's what I want to do for New Hampshire. And do it without impacting services and without downshifting costs to our property taxpayers of the state. Amen.
Thank you very much, Governor Lynch and Commissioner Stevens. I'd like to give each candidate 2 minutes for any closing remarks.
Thank you very much, George. And again, thank you all for coming. Obviously, we have two very different perceptions of what's going on in New Hampshire right now. You know, as I think about New Hampshire today, you look again at our budget. The fact is, in tough economic times, we cut spending. That's what the auditors say. We balanced the budget, generated the surplus, and did it without a sales or an income tax, capital gains or estate tax, or increasing the business tax. We have the lowest state taxes in the country, which is quite good. Our unemployment rate is 40% below the national average. Second fastest job growth rate in the nation. Just the last couple of weeks, I announced 2 initiatives that will bring an additional 1,700 jobs to our state. And we have a number of other initiatives to get people back to work. New Hampshire Working, the Green Launching Pad, to mention just a few. You know, I believe strongly, and I said this at the debate, I believe strongly that we live in the greatest state, the greatest country in the world, and I think about that every day. We were, for the 3rd year in a row, ranked the safest state in the nation. We're always considered one of the most livable states, best educated states, healthiest states. Last year, we were ranked the best state in the country in which to raise kids. Isn't that special? 50 states, and New Hampshire's the best place to raise kids. And as governor, I want to continue to help to navigate New Hampshire through these tough economic times and continue to make New Hampshire the very special state that it is. Thank you very much for inviting me here today, and I really would appreciate your support next Tuesday.
Thank you, Governor Lynch. It's been an honor and privilege to run in this election in this great state of New Hampshire. I care deeply about this state. I was born and raised here, and I want my children to be able to live here as long as they possibly want to and enjoy those New Hampshire values: limited government, less spending. And I've crisscrossed this whole state this summer and spring, and I've met with so many people and so many business owners and so many individuals, so many that are hurting, so many that know about the out-of-control spending in Concord and Washington, so many that have just had enough, but yet they still are optimistic about our future. They are still optimistic because they have that New Hampshire spirit. I'm emboldened by their optimism to make sure we continue down the great path. All these indicators are good. Yes, we have a good climate, but you know what? We can do better. We also have the highest business tax rate in the nation, according to the Tax Foundation. Under Governor Lynch, we went to the highest tax rate in the nation for businesses. We are hurting our business community. They create jobs. We had in the deepest recession of our time when we needed leadership. With 84 taxes and fees, we saw the LLC rooms and meals tax, the LLC income tax, the unemployment increases. Look, we're heading down a critical path here in this election. This election is about our future. It's about my 2 young girls' future. It's about your children's future. It's about New Hampshire. And the bottom line is, those New Hampshire values don't belong to any party. They belong to the people of this great state. And I want to make sure we have no sales or income tax. I want to make sure we keep New Hampshire the way it is, special, so it's not like any other state. But when you're facing a nearly $800 million deficit, this is the critical decision we're here at. We're at a crossroad. Because this election will determine whether we continue down the path of higher taxes, more regulation, bigger government, more and more like Washington, or we go down the path that I want to take this great granite state. The path we have seen for generations: lower taxes, limited government, less spending, more economic prosperity. That's what this election on November 2nd is all about. I ask you for your vote on November 2nd. And I ask you for your support, and I just thank you for this opportunity. God bless all of you.